Hello, friends, and welcome to Boot Room, the show where we look ahead to Town's game at the weekend. And it is a big, big game this weekend at Wigan. Mark, Heath, Stuart Watson here with you to break that down. Obviously, there's a lot going on in the background before we get to the game, Stewie. Ipswich Town are without a manager, which is the big storyline. Of course, John McGrill in interim charge. There's been a few more names added to the mix since we last spoke. Neil Harris, Andy Warren, your partner in crime, broke a story yesterday saying that he's interested in Town and Town are very interested in him. He's currently the betting favourite. And there was another name added to the mix this morning by the Daily Record up in Scotland, formerly of Norwich City, Alex Neil. So do you want to give us your thoughts, first of all, on Neil Harris, probably?
Yeah, Neil Harris is our story. He's one that we believe is firmly in the mix. That's not to say he's the leading candidate or the favourite by any stretch, but he's certainly one under serious consideration and one that would be keen on the job himself. I think the reaction out there from Ipswich fans has probably been slightly underwhelmed by that name. But if you take a step back and you look at his CV, it's actually probably stronger than Paul Cook's when you look at what he's done. He's got a promotion from League One, obviously on his CV with Millwall, and he's led Cardiff to the playoffs in the Championship, a league higher as well. Obviously, an all-action, full-blooded player in his day as well up front. We saw him in the stands just near the press box at Wycombe when Ipswich won 4-1 there, a little over a month ago. I'm sure he wasn't thinking that this job would have been available when he sat and watched that game at that time. But he's one of many in the frame at the moment. I know we're already at the stage just a few days in where people are maybe getting a bit over the various dozens of names that are sloshing about. Obviously, Alex Neil, who you mentioned, is another one. I wouldn't read too much into that. I think if you stripped away the Norwich background, again, his CV would be a pretty solid one for this. Got that lot up the road promoted, obviously, into the Premier League the year that obviously they beat Ipswich in the playoff semi-finals. He went on and did a pretty decent job at Preston for a few years and just finishing outside the playoffs a couple of times before ultimately getting sacked earlier this year. That's a report that basically says that Hibernian wanted him, having sacked Jack Ross, the man who nearly was for Ipswich when Paul Hurst got the job. They've sacked Jack Ross just this week. The report says that they wanted Alex Neil, but he's got his eyes set on a job still in England and that they say he is on a shortlist for Ipswich Town. Read into that what you will. I'd be very surprised if Ipswich went down the ex-Norwich manager route again following Mr. Lambert.
You mentioned there with Neil Harris, the kind of general reaction has been fairly underwhelming. And that was certainly my reaction when we spoke about it yesterday, if it does end up being Neil Harris. But is that me and others being unfair to Mr. Harris? Yes, he's not a sexy name. He's not a Frank Lampard. He's not a Neil Warnock. As you say, his CV stacks up with pretty much anyone.
Yeah, I'd be interested to do a bit of sort of further reading and research on what both Millwall and Cardiff fans sort of made of his time, but literally purely on paper, he has achieved he's achieved a promotion. He's got a club into the Championship playoffs. So maybe we're getting a bit, as much as we're talking about the money behind Ipswich and the ambition, ultimately this is a League One, mid-table League One football team at the moment. And the manager coming in is going to be under immense pressure from day one. They'll have seen that with the way that Cook's sacked. So, maybe that's kind of the level that they're at. But I really don't know where this is going to end up. I don't know if it's going to be a sort of a younger project manager. I don't know if it's going to be a more of an experience, quick fix type vibe. It fascinates me what Ipswich are going to do, and clearly they're taking their time to get this right. I'm a little surprised that obviously Cook's gone to try and salvage this season, and yet we're going to have at least 2 games with an interim manager, maybe more, because I think they'll take their time and try and get this right. You would think that they would want to do something in time for Sunderland and the owners coming over and pack out Portman Road. But if it takes a little longer and it takes, beyond that, then I think they would rather get this right than rush and just do something straight away for the sake of it. So fascinating times.
Just one more question on the manager before we get to the game that's currently on the ticker below, which is obviously what we're here to talk about, Stewie. What sort of manager do you think Town need or should be appointing? And has that changed since what happened at Charlton on Tuesday?
I guess there's an argument that the nature of the defeat on Tuesday night at the Valley suggests that they need someone who can come in and stamp their authority from day one and make a difference in that dressing room, rather than somebody. And I hate to pigeonhole people into this kind of young and hungry just because you're of a certain age and experience. You're either sort of good and talented and have potential or not. I would still like it to be something a bit fresh and new and different for Ipswich Town. That's what I wanted after Mick McCarthy left. They tried to do that and ultimately got it wrong with Paul Hurst, but I still don't think that doesn't mean that it was the wrong thing to try. They just got the wrong person ultimately. We'll never know if it had been a Jack Ross, for example, or someone else of that ilk, or a Danny Cowley, whoever at that time. So I'd still like them to go down that route now. But Liam Manning is someone that jumps off the page doing remarkable things in his early days at MK Dons. I mentioned Anthony Barry on the podcast the other week. Young manager that's risen the ranks at Chelsea, is very much part of Thomas Tuchel's inner circles, part of the Irish FA, had worked with Paul Cook at Wigan before. A rising star, because I think that's in Ipswich's DNA. If you look back at Burley and Robson, people like that, they were young, up and coming managers. They were seen as gambles at the time. So maybe that's a little bit of the romantic in me. But that's the route I'd like them to go down.
Okay, well, that's the management covered, and follow all the latest with us online and in print. Obviously, we'll put up everything that we get as and when. Game time, Stu, because while they haven't got a manager, these are still big games. They lost at Charlton on Tuesday. They really do need to start picking up points, but it doesn't get any easier. They travel to Wigan tomorrow, and on paper, this is a game that I am not feeling good about at all. Wigan are high flying. They've got Liam Richardson as boss, who's going to want to stick it to Town, having just sacked his mate Paul Cook, and Town are in disarray. Clearly, they're all over the place at Charlton. So how are you feeling heading to Wigan tomorrow? Am I wrong?
I wonder if Agent Cook is feeding Liam all the inside info on Ipswich, still smarting after his sacking last week. This should have been the sort of master versus apprentice game that we're all looking forward to seeing. Cook v Richardson. We had all these questions about whether Cook had lost some of his powers by not having his right-hand man, and obviously all that, big summer turnover, it takes time to gel. That argument kind of fell down in itself because Wigan had a massive turnover themselves. And here they are, joint top of the league at the moment, second, level on points with Rotherham and Wycombe, and they've got at least a game or two in hand on most of the leagues. 10 unbeaten in all competitions going into this. Their last defeat was at the end of October. A certain Will Keane banging in the goals for them as well, 9 goals. It's hard after the nature of the performance on Tuesday night not to fear the worst. You just hope that this kind of big dressing room inquest amongst the players after the game on Tuesday night, as maybe the fog of confusion post Paul Cook sacking has kind of lifted a few days on, and maybe that reaction, that angry reaction from the fans, has shocked one or two into life, and they'll come out. I just want them to come out and be energetic and enthusiastic and fight and scrap and show that they want this. If it ultimately ends in defeat, then so be it. But they just didn't turn up on Tuesday night, and that can't happen again.
Shall we talk a little bit about the team then, and what McGreal can do maybe to shake things up and give a different look? You wrote a piece earlier this week about 5 players that he could maybe call upon to do just that, to shake things up, headed by a certain Mr. James Norwood, who McGreal said yesterday is back in training with the first team and is available for selection. So do you want to talk a little bit about what you think McGreal could do and what kind of team you would select? I'll flash it up so we can talk about it. There's your team just ticking along below. On you go.
Well, McGreal talked about the fear factor on Tuesday night. So I think he needs to inject a bit of sort of coolness and ice into this team, players that can kind of handle the pressure of the current situation, but they also need a bit of fire as well. They need a mixture of fire and ice into this team at this current time. And so I've looked at some players that could come in. I think James Norwood certainly could add a bit of fire. He's someone that is a player of that nature. We know what he's all about. He loves to go out and put himself about and have a bit of a rough and tumble out there. And he's also got a personal point to prove, isn't he? Scored a couple of goals for the 23s. By all accounts, has been getting his head down and doing things properly behind the scenes. So it all feels to me like the door is ajar for him. Then the question would be, do you pair him with someone up front? I think you've got nothing to lose here by going with two up front. It's not as if having three in midfield has been doing Ipswich many favours. Scott Fraser played as the number 10 and was lightweight. Yes, he can have a moment of quality to unlock the door, but I think the pros of his classy footballing ability are outweighed by his sort of lightweight nature in that role, the way Ipswich are playing and where their confidence levels are at the moment. So why not go with two up front, bit of blood and thunder. Macaulay Bond's been off it recently, and it would have been unthinkable to talk of him being dropped. I've just about got him in the team. Give him a chance with Norwood alongside him, someone else to stop him being so isolated, and go with Bon and Norwood up front. Why not? So then there's other areas of the team that need looking at. Walton clearly goes again in goal, man of the match by a country mile, stopped it being a cricket scoreline on Tuesday night. Fullbacks is an interesting one. Janoy Danassian didn't do it for me at left back. I know he's played there before, and it's something that I'd kind of suggested that either play Kane or Janoy at left back would have been the sensible option. It didn't work on Tuesday night. And I just think, so if you're going with one or the other of them at right back, I think Janoy's the safer option for this sort of game. Kane, he tires at the moment going deeper into games. I'd go with Janoy up against James McLean down that left side. So who plays at left back? I've gone with Cameron Humphreys, a bit of a wild card pick. We've seen him in central midfield in that Newport Carabao Cup game earlier in the season. Very, very impressive. Handles the ball. Doesn't look overawed at all. 18-year-old. He's got a lot of big clubs looking at him and tracking his progress. The reason I've got him in at left back, because he could play anywhere. He could play right wing, left wing, centre mid. The reason I've got him at left back is because he played there for the 23s recently against Watford away. 1 goal and 3 assists from left back in that position. So that's why I've got Cameron Humphreys in there. Centre half. Where's Toto Enciala's head at the moment after that exchange and the subsequent apology in midweek? I don't know. It's got to be Edmondson. Clearly, he's Ipswich's most informed, best player over the last month or so. There's a question mark over Toto. Luke Wolfenden, does he bring the ice that I talked about? Someone who's Mr. Laid Back, Mr. sort of cool customer, helps Ipswich play out the back a little bit more, wouldn't be frozen to the spot in the same way that Toto is. I've gone with Toto just because I just think maybe Warriors are required for this sort of game, but we'll see on that one. Central midfield, completely overrun in midweek. Evans and Morsey, awful. Nowhere to be seen. Men that have played for Paul Cook before that were perhaps most sort of affected by that. Morsey needs to step up big time as captain. He was sold to us as the man that was going to stop those sort of days happening. And there's been a couple of those on his watch thus far. But he's captain and he needs to go again and he needs to get his head in the game. Lee Evans has been off it for a little while for me. I'd take him out. Idris El Mazouni back in the team. I don't think he's let the team down or looked out of place at all. Whenever called upon this season, we know he cares deeply about this club. He's homegrown, and I think he can add a bit of tigerish qualities in there in that midfield. Bit of fire, as I've said. And then it's a case of who plays on the wings. Who would be the ones supplying Norwood, Bon, maybe Piggott if he gets on or starts even at some stage. If you're playing two up front, I'm not too enamoured by inverted wingers. Ipswich have been doing it quite a lot. A left footer on the right, a right footer on the left. Deliveries have just not been there. Kyle Edwards is running down rabbit holes at the moment. Still no goal. I think he's just got 1 assist to his name. I think he needs to dip out. And I'd maybe put Sonny Aluko over on the left side. He's a left footer. Just get him getting quality balls into box for strikers to attack. And then you're short of options on the right, to be quite honest. Wes Burns, they're really missing him at the moment, but he's still out. Probably Connor Chaplin. He's not the most natural for that right-sided role, but again, I think he's energetic, he's enthusiastic, and that's what Ipswich Town need at this moment in time. And he's got a goal or two in him as well. So that's the team I've gone for.
I like it. Very fulsome explanation there, Stu. Showed you working out. Left me with no questions left to ask other than prediction. Now, as I said, I've got a bad feeling about this. I do hope we see some sort of reaction. And if indeed Town do come away with 0 points, we see some kind of passion and fight on the pitch. I've got a bad feeling, though. I think this is going to be 3-1 Wigan. And obviously, Will Keane's going to score. And I would say that if James Norwood does play, he's either going to score or get sent off, one of the two. Or, as Andy pointed out yesterday, maybe ping his hamstring. one of three options. So, what do you say? Can you give us any hope, scoreline wise?
No, as Paul Cook would say. It's hard to be optimistic going into this. It really is, after what we saw on Tuesday night. There has to be a reaction. I hope there'll be a reaction. I still don't know if that will be enough for them to get a result. 2-1 Wigan, slightly more optimistic than you, but hopefully with a germ of a performance for a new man to work with going forwards.
100%. Let's see some sort of reaction. Never mind the result. Let's see a reaction. Let's see some fight. Let's see some passion from these players this weekend, please. If you're going to the game, enjoy it. If you're not, follow it with us. And obviously look out for the podcast and everything else coming from that next week. Thanks for joining us, and we'll speak to you again next time.